The dust swirled like angry spirits around Gabriella Winters as she stood at the edge of Willow Creek, her 5-year-old daughter Emma clutching her skirts. The town that had been her home for 7 years now turned its back on her, just as the setting sun cast long shadows across the harsh Wyoming landscape of 1877. The whispers had become shouts, the suspicions had become accusations, and now, with nothing but a small trunk of belongings and her daughter's tiny hand in hers, Gabriella faced the vast, unforgiving frontier alone. "Mama, why are people so angry?" Emma asked, her innocent blue eyes reflecting confusion and hurt. Gabriella knelt down, ignoring the pain in her knees from the beating she'd taken earlier that day. She tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her daughter's ear and forced a smile. "Sometimes, darling, people fear what they don't understand. But we'll be just fine." It was a lie, and Gabriella knew it. With night approaching, no horse, little money, and miles of wilderness between towns, their chances were slim. But she wouldn't let Emma see her fear. The accusations of witchcraft had been absurd. Her knowledge of healing herbs and midwifery skills had saved countless lives in Willow Creek, until the new preacher arrived, and the fever took 3 children in 1 week. The grieving families needed someone to blame. "Mrs. Winters," Sheriff Davis called from the edge of town, his voice carrying on the wind. "I've held them back as long as I can. You best be moving on now." Behind him, Gabriella could see the mob gathering, torches already lit despite the daylight still lingering. They wouldn't follow far, but their hatred had made its point. "Come, Emma," she said, hoisting their trunk with one hand and gripping her daughter with the other. "We need to walk a bit." They followed the dusty trail that led away from Willow Creek, each step taking them further from civilization and deeper into danger. Emma's small legs tired quickly, and Gabriella was forced to abandon the trunk, taking only what she could carry in a satchel: some food, a blanket, her husband's pocket watch, and the herbs she'd been condemned for. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in violent shades of red and purple. Darkness would bring coyotes, wolves, and possibly worse. Gabriella tried to remember the map she'd seen in the general store. Was there another settlement within walking distance? A homestead where they might beg for shelter? "Mama, I'm tired," Emma whimpered as they crested another hill, revealing nothing but more endless prairie. "I know, sweetheart. Just a little." The sound of hoofbeats cut through the twilight. Gabriella tensed, pulling Emma behind her. Outlaws roamed these parts, and a woman and child alone were easy prey. She fumbled in her pocket for the small knife her husband had left her before heading off to fight in the war, a battle from which he never returned. A silhouette appeared against the darkening sky, a tall man atop a powerful chestnut stallion. As he drew closer, Gabriella could make out his features: a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, piercing eyes beneath the brim of a worn Stetson, and shoulders broad enough to suggest he could handle himself in a fight. He reined his horse to a stop several feet away, studying them with an intensity that made Gabriella tighten her grip on the knife. "You're a long way from anywhere, madam," he said, his voice deep and gravelly, but not unkind. "Especially with a little one." "We're just passing through," Gabriella answered, trying to keep her voice steady. His gaze shifted to the town behind them, then back to her face, which she knew bore a bruise from where the blacksmith's wife had struck her. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "They run you out?" he asked bluntly. Gabriella straightened her spine. "They chose to part with my services as a midwife and healer." A humorless smile crossed his face. "That's a fancy way of saying they blamed you for something that wasn't your fault." He dismounted in one fluid motion, and Gabriella took a step back, keeping Emma behind her. "Name's Ryder Blackwood," he said, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "I've got a homestead about 3 miles east of here. You won't make it through the night out in the open, not with wolves and who knows what else prowling around." "And why would you help us, Mr. Blackwood?" Gabriella asked, skepticism evident in her tone. He looked at her for a long moment. Then his eyes softened as they fell on Emma, who was peering curiously around her mother's skirts. "Because once upon a time, someone helped me when I needed it," he said simply. Then, with a directness that took her breath away, he added, "You don't belong out here alone. You belong with me at least until you figure out your next move." "Mama, I'm scared," Emma whispered, tugging at Gabriella's skirt. Ryder crouched down to Emma's level, keeping a respectful distance. "What's your name, little lady?" "Emma," she replied shyly. "Well, Emma, I've got a horse named Copper who loves children, and a warm fire back at my cabin. Your mama can decide what's best, but you're welcome to meet Copper if she says it's okay." Emma looked up at Gabriella with pleading eyes. The reality of their situation was stark. Night was falling. They had nowhere to go, and despite her suspicions, this stranger was offering them shelter. "Do you give your word that we'll be safe?" Gabriella asked, meeting his gaze steadily. "On my honor," Ryder replied, placing his hand over his heart. "No harm will come to either of you under my roof." Gabriella weighed her options. Death by exposure or wild animals seemed a certainty if they remained out here. And there was something in Ryder Blackwood's eyes, a sincerity, perhaps, or a shared understanding of what it meant to be an outcast. "Very well, Mr. Blackwood," she said finally. "We accept your offer of shelter. For tonight." He nodded, as if he had expected nothing less. "For tonight," he agreed, then gestured to his horse. "Let me help you up. The little one can ride in front of me." With unexpected gentleness, he lifted Emma onto the saddle, then offered his hand to Gabriella. She hesitated only briefly before accepting it, feeling the calluses on his palm as he helped her mount behind him. As she settled onto the horse, awkwardly placing her hands at his sides to keep from falling, Ryder Blackwood clicked his tongue, and the stallion began moving through the growing darkness. "Hold on tight, ladies," he said over his shoulder. "Copper knows the way home." The rhythmic gait of the horse lulled Emma to sleep within minutes, her small body leaning trustingly against Ryder's chest. Gabriella remained alert, watching the shadows for danger and wondering if she had made the right choice. "They called me a witch," she said suddenly, feeling a strange need to explain herself. "Because I use herbs to heal. Because I delivered a stillborn baby last week, and the mother nearly died." Ryder was quiet for a moment before responding. "People fear what they don't understand, and fear makes them cruel." "You seem to understand it well," Gabriella observed. "Let's just say I've been on the receiving end of a town's fear myself," he replied cryptically. They rode in silence after that, the only sounds the steady hoofbeats and the occasional cry of a night bird. True to his word, after about half an hour, a small cabin came into view, nestled against a grove of cottonwood trees. A thin trail of smoke rose from the stone chimney, and a corral stood empty beside a modest barn. "Home sweet home," Ryder announced, bringing Copper to a halt. "It's not much, but it's solid and warm." He dismounted first, then reached up to take Emma from the saddle. The child stirred but didn't wake as he gently handed her down to Gabriella, who had slid off the horse on her own. "I'll get Copper settled and be right in," he said, nodding toward the cabin door. "It's unlocked. Make yourselves comfortable." Gabriella hesitated only briefly before carrying Emma to the cabin. The interior was simple but clean, a central room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a small cooking area. A door at the back presumably led to a bedroom. The fire burned low but steady, casting a warm glow over the sparse furnishings. She laid Emma on a bearskin rug near the fire, covering her with her shawl. The child curled up contentedly, exhausted from their ordeal. Ryder entered a few minutes later, bringing with him the smells of horse and leather and the crisp night air. He hung his hat on a peg by the door and ran a hand through his dark hair, which fell just below his ears in waves. "You must be hungry," he said, moving to the small kitchen area. "I've got some stew left from this morning. It's not fancy, but it'll fill your bellies." "You live here alone?" Gabriella asked, taking in the surroundings more carefully. "Just me and Copper," he confirmed, stirring the pot he'd placed over the fire. "Been that way for 3 years now." "You're a long way from town yourself," she observed. "That's by design," he replied with a wry smile. "Like I said, towns and I don't always see eye to eye." As he worked, Gabriella noticed the careful efficiency of his movements. This was a man accustomed to taking care of himself, yet there was nothing rough or hurried about the way he prepared their meal. When he handed her a bowl of stew, their fingers brushed momentarily, and she felt an unexpected warmth that had nothing to do with the food. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For all of this." Ryder nodded, his eyes meeting hers briefly before he turned away. "You should eat while it's hot. We can talk about what comes next in the morning. That night, Gabriella slept beside Emma on Ryder's bed. He had insisted, taking the bearskin rug for himself despite her protests. As she drifted off to sleep, she could hear him moving quietly around the cabin, banking the fire, checking the doors. For the first time since the accusations had started, she felt safe. But the question remained, what would tomorrow bring? Morning arrived with a gentle persistence, sunlight filtering through the cabin's single window and painting patterns across the rough wooden floor. Gabriella woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. Emma still slept peacefully beside her, one small hand curled beneath her chin. The cabin was quiet, and for a moment, Gabriella wondered if Ryder Blackwood had abandoned them in the night. But then she heard the rhythmic sound of chopping wood outside, and her tension eased slightly. She rose quietly, straightening her wrinkled dress as best she could before stepping into the main room. Through the window, she could see Ryder splitting logs with practiced efficiency, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. Sweat glistened on his brow despite the cool morning air. When he noticed her watching, he paused, nodded a greeting, and gathered an armful of split wood to bring inside. "Good morning," he said, stacking the logs beside the fireplace. "Hope you slept well." "Better than I expected to," Gabriella admitted. "Thank you again for your kindness." Ryder shrugged off her gratitude. "Coffee's brewing. Thought you might want some before you decide what's next." The pointed reminder of their temporary arrangement hung in the air between them. Gabriella moved to the small stove where a pot of coffee bubbled. "I have some money," she said, pouring herself a cup. "Not much, but enough to get us to the next town, perhaps. If you could point us in the right direction." Ryder studied her over the rim of his own cup. "Nearest town is Redemption, about 40 miles east. Not the friendliest place, but they might not have heard about you yet." 40 miles, Gabriella repeated, her heart sinking. Without a horse, it would take days to reach it on foot, especially with Emma. "I could take you," Ryder offered, seeming to read her thoughts. "But not today. Storm's coming in from the north. Be here by nightfall." As if on cue, Emma appeared in the bedroom doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. When she saw Ryder, she gave him a shy smile. "Can I see Copper now?" she asked, remembering his promise from the night before. Ryder's expression softened in a way that transformed his rugged features. "Sure thing, little lady. After breakfast." He set about making a simple meal of cornmeal mush with molasses, and Gabriella was surprised to see how deftly he managed the cooking. Most bachelors she knew ate poorly, if regularly at all. "You're good at this," she commented as he served Emma a generous portion. "Had to learn," he replied. "Out here, you either cook or you starve." After breakfast, true to his word, Ryder took Emma to meet Copper. Gabriella followed, watching as the big man lifted her daughter onto the chestnut stallion's back and led them in a slow circle around the corral. Emma's delighted laughter, a sound Gabriella hadn't heard in weeks, echoed across the homestead. "Mama, look at me," Emma called, sitting tall in the saddle while Ryder kept a protective hand on her back. "I see you, darling," Gabriella replied, smiling despite the uncertainty of their situation. As the morning progressed, dark clouds began to gather on the northern horizon, confirming Ryder's prediction of an approaching storm. He set Emma to gathering eggs from the small chicken coop while he and Gabriella discussed their options. "The storm might last a couple of days," he explained, leaning against the corral fence. "Mountain weather is unpredictable this time of year." Gabriella felt a mix of anxiety and relief at the delay. "We've imposed on you enough already." Ryder shook his head. "It's no imposition. Truth is, it's been a long time since I've had company out here." He glanced at Emma, who was carefully placing eggs in a basket. "She's a good kid." "She's all I have," Gabriella said softly. "Her father died at Missionary Ridge, Confederate sharpshooter." The memory still ached, though time had dulled its edge. "Thomas never even knew I was expecting." Ryder nodded, understanding in his eyes. "War took a lot of good men." "Were you?" "Union cavalry," he confirmed. "Though I don't talk about it much." Before she could ask more, Emma ran up with her basket of eggs, proudly showing her collection. The conversation shifted, but Gabriella found herself wondering what experiences had led Ryder Blackwood to this isolated existence, and why he had so readily opened his home to strangers. By midday, The storm clouds had darkened the sky, and a cold wind whipped across the homestead. Ryder busied himself securing the animals and bringing in extra firewood, while Gabriella helped Emma reinforce the chicken coop against the coming weather. "We should get inside," Ryder called as the first fat raindrops began to fall. "This is going to be a bad one." They barely made it to the cabin before the skies opened up, rain pelting the roof with a sound like marbles being dropped on tin. Thunder rumbled in the distance, growing closer with each clap. Emma pressed against Gabriella's side, frightened by the storm's fury. "Will the roof hold, Mama?" "Of course it will," Ryder answered before Gabriella could. He winked at Emma. "I built it myself. Strong enough to withstand anything Mother Nature throws at it." To distract Emma, he showed her how to play a simple card game with a worn deck he produced from a drawer. Soon, the little girl was laughing again, her fear forgotten as they played at the table while the storm raged outside. Gabriella used the opportunity to take stock of their provisions. Her small satchel contained little more than a change of clothes for Emma, her healing herbs, and the few coins she'd managed to save. It wouldn't get them far, especially with winter approaching. "Something troubling you?" Ryder asked quietly, coming to stand beside her while Emma arranged the cards and patterns on the table. Gabriella sighed. "Just wondering how we'll manage once we reach redemption. I have skills as a midwife and healer, but those same skills got us driven out of Willow Creek." "People can be quick to blame what they don't understand," Ryder agreed. "But not everyone is like that. You weren't," she pointed out, looking up at him curiously. "Why?" He was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "I've seen enough real evil in this world to know the difference between that and someone just trying to make their way." He glanced at her bruised face. "And I know what it's like to be on the wrong side of a town's judgment." Before she could press further, a particularly violent thunderclap shook the cabin, and Emma cried out in fear. Ryder moved to the fireplace, adding another log to keep the chill at bay. "How about a story?" he suggested to Emma. "I know a good one about a brave little girl and her magic horse." Emma's eyes widened with interest, and she nodded eagerly. As Ryder began his tale, crafting an adventure story that had Emma hanging on every word, Gabriella watched him with growing curiosity. This solitary cowboy, who by his own admission didn't get along with towns, showed a gentleness with her daughter that seemed at odds with his rough exterior. The storm lasted through the night and into the next day, confining them to the cabin. Gabriella expected to feel trapped, but instead found an unexpected comfort in the enforced togetherness. Ryder taught Emma how to whittle simple figures from scraps of wood, keeping her safely away from the sharp knife's edge. In turn, Gabriella helped prepare meals from Ryder's modest stores, adding her knowledge of herbs to improve the simple fare. By the second evening, as rain continued to drum on the roof, a strange feeling of domesticity had settled over the cabin. Emma had fallen asleep on the bearskin rug, exhausted from a day of indoor games and stories. "She's a resilient one," Ryder commented, watching the sleeping child with a soft expression. "She has to be," Gabriella replied, sitting across from him at the table. "Life hasn't given her much choice." "Like her mother," he observed. Gabriella met his gaze, surprised by the warmth she found there. "Perhaps, though there are days when I wonder if I'm strong enough for both of us. From what I've seen, you are." He reached for the coffee pot, refilling both their cups. "Mind if I ask what really happened in Willow Creek?" Gabriella stared into her cup, the memories still raw. "I've been the midwife there since Emma was born. Never lost a mother until last month. Mary Jenkins came to me too late. The baby was already gone, and she was bleeding heavily. I did everything I could, but—" She shook her head. The new preacher had been warning against heathen remedies since he arrived. When Mary died, he found his perfect example. "And the town turned on you," Ryder finished for her. "Some stood by me at first. But then the fever came through, took 3 children in a week. The preacher said it was God's punishment for harboring a witch." Her voice broke slightly. "By yesterday, even those who defended me were throwing stones at our door." Ryder's jaw tightened. "Cowards, the lot of them." "They were afraid," Gabriella said, though the defense felt hollow even to her own ears. "Fear makes people do terrible things. Still doesn't make it right." He studied her for a moment. "What will you do now?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Gabriella had been avoiding thinking too far ahead, focusing instead on immediate survival. Find somewhere new, I suppose. Somewhere they'll accept a woman who knows herbs and midwifery. Somewhere Emma can grow up safely. She looked up at him. What about you? Why did you choose this solitary life? Ryder was quiet for so long that Gabriella thought he might not answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. After the war, I came home to find my family farm burned to the ground. Confederate raiders had come through, killed my parents and sister. His fingers tightened around his cup. I tracked the men responsible to a town called Bitter Creek. When I confronted them, things got out of hand. You killed them, Gabriella stated, not a question. 2 of them. The third was the mayor's son. His eyes met hers, challenging her to judge him. They had a quick trial, found me guilty of murder despite it being self-defense. I was sentenced to hang. But you escaped? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Had help from the sheriff's daughter, believe it or not. She'd seen what really happened. Got me out the night before the hanging. He gestured to the cabin around them. Been here ever since, keeping to myself. Safer that way. Gabriella absorbed his story, understanding now why he had so readily helped them. So you're a wanted man. In Bitter Creek, maybe. But that was 3 years ago, and it's 200 miles from here. Most folks have probably forgotten by now. He set his cup down. Still, I found it's easier not to test people's memories. The revelation should have frightened her, but strangely, it had the opposite effect. Ryder Blackwood had killed men, yes, but to avenge his family. He had been judged unfairly, just as she had. Thank you for telling me, she said quietly. He nodded, standing to add more wood to the fire. You deserve to know who was sheltering you and your daughter. As the firelight played across his features, Gabriella felt something shift inside her, a warming, a softening toward this solitary man who had opened his home and now has passed to them. The storm should break by morning, Ryder said, changing the subject. We can head toward redemption if you still want to. Did she still want to? The question caught Gabriella off guard. 2 days ago, reaching the next town had seemed the only option. Now, she wasn't so sure. Let's see what the morning brings, she said finally, and was rewarded with a small, genuine smile from Ryder that made her heart beat just a little faster. True to his prediction, dawn arrived with clear skies and a freshness in the air that spoke of the storm's passing. Emma woke early, eager to go outside after being cooped up for 2 days. Gabriella watched from the cabin door as Ryder showed her daughter how to feed the chickens, his big hands gentle as he demonstrated how much grain to scatter. Copper wants to go for a ride, Emma announced when she returned to the cabin, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Can we, Mama? Mr. Ryder said he'd take us if you said it was okay. Gabriella looked to Ryder, who stood a few paces behind Emma. The trail to redemption will be muddy after all that rain, he explained. But we could take a short ride around the property if you're feeling up to it. Give the ground a chance to dry out before we attempt the journey. It was a reasonable suggestion, and Emma's pleading eyes made it impossible to refuse. A short ride sounds lovely, Gabriella agreed, earning a whoop of joy from her daughter. Within the hour, they were mounted on Copper, with Emma secured between Ryder and Gabriella. The chestnut stallion seemed to understand the importance of his passengers, moving at a steady, gentle pace as Ryder guided him away from the cabin and into the surrounding wilderness. The mountain landscape was breathtaking after the rain. Wildflowers had sprung up overnight, dotting the meadows with splashes of color, and the distant peaks were crisp against the blue sky. Ryder pointed out landmarks as they rode, naming rock formations and telling stories about the wildlife that inhabited the area. Look, Mama, Emma cried, pointing to a stand of aspen trees where a doe and her fawn grazed peacefully. They're like us. The innocent observation brought a lump to Gabriella's throat. Yes, they were like the deer, vulnerable, watchful, seeking safety in an uncertain world. Ryder led them to a small stream that bubbled cheerfully over rocks, swollen from the recent rain. They dismounted, and while Emma explored the water's edge under Gabriella's watchful eye, Ryder disappeared briefly into the woods, returning with a handful of wild strawberries. Not many left this late in the season, he said, offering them to Emma, who accepted the tiny fruits with delight. You know a lot about living off the land, Gabriella observed as Emma carefully washed the berries in the stream. Had to learn, Ryder replied, settling on a sun-warmed rock beside her. First winter out here, I nearly starved before I figured things out. And now? She asked, curious about the life he had built for himself. Now I get by? Hunt, fish, grow what I can. Trade with the occasional trapper who comes through. He glanced at her. It's not an easy life, but it's a free one. Do you ever get lonely? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Ryder was quiet for a moment, watching Emma as she carefully arranged her strawberries in a pattern on a flat stone. There are different kinds of lonely, he finally said. Out here, I miss conversation sometimes, human contact. But in towns, surrounded by people who don't understand you or want you gone, that's a worse kind of lonely. Gabriella nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. In Willow Creek, after the accusation started, I felt more alone than I ever had, even with people all around. That's the kind of lonely I can't abide, Ryder said softly. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a shared understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. Gabriella felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear or uncertainty. The moment was broken when Emma ran up, proudly displaying a small, smooth stone she had found in the stream. Look, Mr. Ryder. It's shaped like a heart. Ryder examined the stone with exaggerated seriousness. So it is, Miss Emma. That's a special find. Means good luck is coming your way. Really? Emma asked, eyes wide. That's what my mother always said, he confirmed with a wink at Gabriella. They spent another hour by the stream before mounting Copper again and continuing their exploration of Ryder's land. He showed them a hidden valley filled with wildflowers, a cliff face where eagles nested, and finally, a small cabin in even worse repair than his own. First place I built when I got here, he explained as they dismounted to look at the primitive structure. Didn't know much about cabin building then. Nearly froze that first winter before I managed to construct something more substantial. Why did you stay? Gabriella asked, running her hand along the rough-hewn logs. After such a difficult beginning? Ryder shrugged, but his eyes were thoughtful. Nowhere else to go, I suppose. And there's a piece out here I never found elsewhere. As they rode back to the main cabin, the sun beginning its descent toward the western mountains, Gabriella found herself reluctant for the day to end. There was a simplicity to this life that appealed to her, no judgmental eyes watching her every move, no whispers behind hands as she passed. Just open sky, honest work, and surprisingly good company. Ryder prepared a meal of rabbit stew that evening, the meat flavored with herbs from his small garden. As they ate, Emma chattered happily about their day's adventures. Her previous fear of the tall, quiet man completely vanished. Can we stay here forever, Mama? She asked suddenly, looking up from her bowl with hopeful eyes. The question hung in the air, bringing a flush to Gabriella's cheeks. She glanced at Ryder, who had gone very still, his expression unreadable. Emma, that's not polite, Gabriella admonished gently. Mr. Blackwood has been very kind to offer us shelter, but we can't impose on him indefinitely. It's not an imposition, Ryder said quietly, surprising her. His eyes met hers across the table. The cabin's small, but it could be expanded. There's good hunting here, fertile soil. A child could grow up happy in these mountains. Gabriella's heart quickened at his words. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you consider your options carefully before rushing off to another town that might treat you no better than the last, he replied carefully. Winter's coming. The journey to redemption will only get harder as the weather turns. So we could stay until spring? Emma asked eagerly. Ryder nodded, his eyes still on Gabriella. If that's what your mother wants. It was a generous offer, perhaps too generous. I couldn't accept charity for that long, Gabriella said, though part of her longed to accept immediately. We would need to contribute, to earn our keep. This isn't charity, Ryder assured her. Having someone to share the work would be a help to me. And he hesitated, then finished softly. The company would be welcome. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep, Gabriella sat by the fire, weighing Ryder's offer against the uncertainty of moving on. To stay meant security, at least through the winter. But it also meant, what? Living in close quarters with a man she barely knew, yet felt inexplicably drawn to? You're still up, Ryder observed, entering quietly from outside where he'd been checking on the animals one last time. Thinking, Gabriella admitted. He settled in the chair opposite hers, the firelight throwing his features into sharp relief. Having second thoughts about my offer? No, she said honestly. Just wondering if I'm being foolish to even consider it. Because of me? He asked directly. Gabriella met his gaze. Because of what I'm feeling, she admitted. It seems reckless to trust these feelings when we've known each other such a short time. Ryder leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I believe there are moments in life when paths cross for a reason. When I found you and Emma on that road, it felt. He struggled for the right word. It felt right somehow, like I was exactly where I needed to be. I felt it too, Gabriella whispered. But I have Emma to consider. I can't afford to make mistakes. Staying here doesn't have to mean anything more than safe shelter and honest work, Ryder assured her. Whatever else might develop between us, if anything does, can happen in its own time. His understanding eased something inside her. Then yes, she decided. We'll stay at least until spring. The smile that transformed Ryder's face made her heart skip. I'm glad, he said simply. The next morning, they began preparing for winter in earnest. Ryder showed Gabriella his food stores, which would need significant supplementing to feed 3 through the cold months. Together, they made a list of tasks: hunting, preserving meat, gathering late autumn berries and roots, harvesting the last of the garden vegetables. Emma threw herself into the work with enthusiasm, happily gathering eggs each morning and helping Gabriella preserve fruit in the honey Ryder traded for with a trapper who kept bees in a valley to the south. Days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Ryder would hunt in the early mornings, often returning with a deer or several rabbits that Gabriella would prepare for smoking or salting. In the afternoons, they worked together to reinforce the cabin against winter winds, adding extra chinking between logs and ensuring the roof was sound. One evening, about 2 weeks after they had decided to stay, Ryder returned from hunting with something hidden behind his back. Got something for you, little lady, he said to Emma, who looked up from where she was practicing her letters in the dirt floor with a stick. From behind his back, he produced a small wooden horse, carefully carved and polished smooth. Emma gasped with delight, taking the toy reverently in her small hands. It's copper, she exclaimed, recognizing the likeness to Ryder's chestnut stallion. Thought you might like your own horse to keep you company, Ryder explained, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Do you like it? Emma responded by throwing her arms around his legs in a fierce hug. I love it. Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Gabriella watched the exchange with a warm feeling spreading through her chest. Seeing her daughter's joy and the pleased expression on Ryder's face confirmed that they had made the right decision in staying. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep with the wooden horse clutched in her hand, Gabriella found Ryder outside, staring up at the star-filled sky. That was a beautiful gift, she said, coming to stand beside him. You didn't have to do that. Wanted to, he replied simply. She reminds me of my sister at that age. Always curious, never still. You don't talk about your family much, Gabriella observed. Ryder was quiet for a moment. Hurts less that way sometimes. And other times? He glanced at her, a small smile softening his features. Other times, it feels good to remember. Sarah, my sister, she would have liked you. She had the same spirit, the same determination. Tell me about her, Gabriella encouraged, and for the first time, Ryder opened up about his past stories of growing up on a Tennessee farm, of his father teaching him to hunt, his mother's cooking, his sister's laugh. As he spoke, Gabriella understood that he was sharing something precious with her, pieces of himself he had kept carefully guarded. In return, she told him about her own childhood in Pennsylvania, her father's work as a schoolteacher, her mother's garden that had sparked her interest in healing herbs. The night air grew chilly, and without thinking, Gabriella moved closer to Ryder's warmth. When his arms settled around her shoulders, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I'm glad you stayed, he said softly, his breath warm against her hair. So am I, she replied, and meant it with her whole heart. The days grew shorter as autumn deepened toward winter. Ryder expanded the chicken coop to accommodate more birds, trading with a homesteader several miles away for additional hens to ensure a steady supply of eggs through the winter. Gabriella established a small workshop in one corner of the cabin where she prepared herbal remedies, tinctures for coughs, salves for burns and cuts, teas for various ailments. You could trade these with the trappers who come through, Ryder suggested one evening as he watched her work. They're always in need of medicines out on the trap lines. The idea pleased her a way to contribute meaningfully to their small household economy. But more than that, it was the casual way Ryder spoke of the future, including her in his plans, that warmed her heart. Emma flourished in their new life. She followed Ryder like a shadow whenever he worked around the homestead, absorbing his knowledge of animals and the land like a sponge. He, in turn, showed infinite patience with her questions, teaching her the names of trees and birds, how to recognize animal tracks, which berries were safe to eat. The first snow came in late October, coating the world in pristine white. Emma was beside herself with excitement, having seen snow only a few times in her young life. Ryder fashioned a small sled from barrel staves and took her sliding down the gentle slope behind the cabin, her squeals of delight echoing through the crisp air. Watching them from the cabin door, Gabriella felt a profound sense of rightness, as though the pieces of a puzzle had finally aligned. This unlikely haven, this unexpected family they were forming, it felt more like home than Willow Creek ever had. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep, exhausted from her day of play, Ryder added extra logs to the fire and joined Gabriella at the table where she was mending one of Emma's dresses. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low so as not to disturb the sleeping child. "The cabin's getting crowded with the three of us. I should build another room before winter sets in fully." "Is that possible?" Gabriella asked, setting aside her sewing. "With the snow already here?" "The first snow usually melts. We'll have a few weeks of fair weather before winter truly arrives." He sketched a rough plan on the table with his finger. "An addition off the back, nothing fancy, but it would give us all more space." Us. The word hung in the air between them, full of meaning. Not just temporary guests anymore, but something more permanent. "I could help," Gabriella offered. "I've never built anything, but I'm willing to learn." Ryder smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his face. "I'd welcome the help." Their eyes met across the table, and the connection between them seemed to strengthen, to deepen into something neither could deny any longer. Slowly, Ryder reached across and took her hand in his calloused thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. "Gabriella," he said, her name sounding different somehow in his deep voice. "I need to say something, and I'm not good with words, so bear with me." She nodded, her heart beating faster. "When I found you on that road, I told you that you belonged with me. I didn't understand then why those words came out of my mouth. It was reckless, forward even." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But these past weeks, watching you with Emma, seeing how you've brought life back to this place, I know now it was the truth. You do belong here, with me, if that's what you want." Gabriella felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "I do want that," she whispered. "More than I've wanted anything in a very long time." Ryder's hand tightened on hers. "I can't offer much. This life isn't easy, and I'm not an easy man. But I promise you this, you and Emma will never want for protection or care as long as I draw breath." "We don't need much," Gabriella assured him. "Just honesty, respect, and—" She hesitated, then added softly, "and love." "That," Ryder said, his voice roughening with emotion, "I can give in abundance, though I might not always know how to show it right." "You already do," she told him, thinking of the wooden horse, the patient lessons with Emma, the gentle way he treated them both. Slowly, as if giving her every chance to pull away, Ryder leaned across the table. Gabriella met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home after a long, difficult journey. His kiss was gentle at first, questioning, then deepened as she responded, her free hand coming up to touch his face. When they finally pulled apart, Gabriella felt breathless, her heart full to bursting. Ryder's eyes were dark with emotion, his hand still holding hers as if he couldn't bear to let go. "What do we tell Emma?" she asked, practical concerns intruding even in this perfect moment. Ryder glanced at the sleeping child. "The truth, I think. That I care for her mother very much, and for her too. That I want us to be a family, if she's agreeable." "She adores you already," Gabriella assured him. "But we should take things slowly, for her sake." Ryder nodded, understanding in his eyes. "We have all winter," he said, the promise in his voice warming her more than the fire ever could. True to his word, Ryder began work on the cabin addition the very next day. The first snow had indeed melted, leaving the ground muddy but workable. Together, they felled several straight pines, stripped them of branches, and began the process of notching the logs to fit together. Emma was delighted by the project, especially when Ryder explained that the new room would eventually be hers. Your very own space, he told her as she helped gather stones for the foundation. Every young lady needs a place to keep her treasures. They worked from dawn to dusk each day, racing against the approaching winter. Gabriella's hands grew calloused from handling the rough logs, but she welcomed the physical labor. There was something deeply satisfying about building something tangible, something that would shelter them through the coming seasons. In the evenings, exhausted but content, they would sit by the fire while Ryder told Emma stories of his travels or taught her simple songs he remembered from his childhood. Sometimes, after Emma had fallen asleep, Gabriella and Ryder would talk late into the night, sharing memories, hopes, and increasingly, tender moments that spoke of their growing feelings. 3 weeks after they began construction, the addition was nearly complete, a small but sturdy room connected to the main cabin. They celebrated by preparing a special meal together, roasting a wild turkey Ryder had shot that morning and baking cornbread in the Dutch oven. To our new home, Ryder toasted, raising his cup of cider. Our home, Emma repeated happily, clinking her cup against his. Gabriella's heart swelled at the sight of them together, her daughter and this man who had become so important to both of them in such a short time. To family, she added softly, meeting Ryder's gaze over the rim of her cup. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with a crispness to the air that spoke of snow. Ryder announced his intention to make one final hunting trip before the weather turned, hoping to add more meat to their winter stores. I won't go far, he promised, checking his rifle before slinging it over his shoulder. Should be back by nightfall. Gabriella felt an unexpected pang of worry as she watched him prepare to leave. Be careful, she said, handing him a small packet of jerky and dried fruit for the trail. Ryder smiled, touching her cheek gently. Always am. He bent to kiss her, then ruffled Emma's hair. You take care of your mama while I'm gone, all right? I will, Emma promised solemnly. And when you get back, can we finish my room? First thing, Ryder agreed, then mounted Copper and rode off into the forest, turning once to wave before disappearing among the trees. The day passed slowly as Gabriella and Emma worked on finishing touches for the new room, hanging a curtain for privacy, arranging Emma's few possessions on a small shelf Ryder had built into the wall. As dusk approached, Gabriella found herself checking the tree line more frequently, listening for the sound of hoofbeats. When full darkness fell with no sign of Ryder, she told herself not to worry. Hunting could be unpredictable. Perhaps he had tracked a deer farther than expected. She prepared a simple supper, keeping a portion warm by the fire for Ryder's return. But as the hours passed and midnight approached, Gabriella's concern grew into genuine fear. Something was wrong. She felt it in her bones. Ryder knew these woods like the back of his hand. If he had planned to be late, he would have said so. Emma had fallen asleep hours ago, but Gabriella remained by the fire, listening to every sound outside the cabin, starting at each creak and groan of the forest. When she heard hoofbeats approaching shortly after midnight, relief washed over her. She rushed to the door, throwing it open with a welcoming smile that died on her lips as she saw not Ryder, but Copper riderless, his saddle empty. No, she whispered, her heart seizing with fear. The stallion nickered softly, coming to a halt before the cabin. There was no blood on the saddle, no sign of violence, but Ryder's rifle was missing from its scabbard. Gabriella's mind raced. She couldn't leave Emma alone, nor could she take the child into the dark forest to search for Ryder. But neither could she simply wait, not knowing if he was injured or worse. With shaking hands, she secured Copper in the corral, then returned to the cabin to think. Dawn was still hours away. If Ryder had been thrown from his horse, he could be lying injured in the freezing forest. Each passing minute decreased his chances of survival. A soft whimper from the new room caught her attention. Emma, having a bad dream perhaps. Gabriella went to comfort her daughter, stroking her hair until she settled back into peaceful sleep. Looking down at Emma's innocent face, Gabriella made her decision. She would wait until first light, then take Emma with her on Copper to search for Ryder. It wasn't ideal, but it was the only option that made sense. In the meantime, she stoked the fire high, hoping against hope that Ryder would find his way back on his own. The night stretched endlessly, each minute an agony of worry. Gabriella prepared for the search, packing bandages, her healing herbs, water, and food. She laid out warm clothes for Emma and herself, and found Ryder's spare pistol, loading it carefully as he had taught her. As the first gray light of dawn filtered through the cabin windows, Gabriella gently woke Emma. "Darling, I need you to be very brave today," she explained, helping the sleepy child dress in her warmest clothes. "Mr. Ryder hasn't come home, and Copper returned without him. We need to go find him." Emma's eyes widened with concern. "Is he hurt?" "I don't know, sweetheart," Gabriella answered honestly. "But if he is, we'll help him. That's what family does." The simple statement seemed to steady Emma, who nodded with a determination beyond her years. "I can be brave, Mama." They set out as soon as there was enough light to see the trail, Gabriella in the saddle with Emma secured before her. Copper seemed to understand their mission, following the path he had taken the day before without guidance. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of Copper's hooves on the frozen ground and the occasional call of a winter bird. Gabriella called Ryder's name periodically, her voice echoing through the trees, but no answer came. They had been riding for nearly 2 hours when Copper suddenly tensed, his ears pricking forward. Before Gabriella could react, the stallion veered off the main trail, following what appeared to be a game path down into a ravine. "Copper, what are you?" Gabriella began, then fell silent as she realized the horse was tracking his master. She gave him his head, trusting his instincts more than her own in these woods. The ravine was steep, forcing them to dismount and lead Copper carefully down the slope. At the bottom, a small stream trickled between ice-edged rocks. And there, slumped against a boulder beside the water, was Ryder. "Ryder!" Gabriella cried, rushing forward with Emma close behind. He was pale, his breathing shallow, a makeshift bandage soaked with blood wrapped around his left thigh. His eyes fluttered open at her voice. "Knew you'd come," he whispered, a weak smile crossing his face. "Both of you. What happened?" Gabriella asked, already unwrapping the bandage to assess the wound. "Mountain lion," Ryder explained through gritted teeth. "Surprised me while I was field dressing a deer. Got my leg before I could shoot it. Fell down this ravine in the struggle." He grimaced as Gabriella exposed the wound for deep gashes that had thankfully stopped bleeding but looked angry and potentially infected. Copper bolted. "Couldn't blame him. He came back for you," Emma said, patting the horse's nose. "He brought us to you." "Smart horse," Ryder acknowledged, then winced as Gabriella began cleaning the wound with water from the stream. "This needs proper tending," she said, her healer's mind already cataloging which herbs and treatments would be needed. "But first we need to get you home. Can you ride?" Ryder nodded grimly. "If you help me up." It took all three of them, Gabriella, Emma steadying Copper, and Ryder himself gritting his teeth against the pain to get him mounted. Gabriella climbed up behind him to keep him steady, while Emma walked alongside, leading Copper carefully back up the ravine and onto the main trail. The journey back to the cabin was slow and difficult. Ryder's strength ebbed as they rode, and more than once Gabriella feared he might slip from the saddle despite her arms around him. But finally, the cabin came into view, smoke still rising from the chimney where the fire had been banked. Getting Ryder inside and onto the bed was another ordeal, but once he was settled, Gabriella set to work in earnest. She sent Emma to fetch water while she gathered her herbs and supplies. "This is going to hurt," she warned as she prepared to clean the wounds thoroughly. Ryder managed a weak laugh. "Can't hurt worse than it already does." But it did, and his face went white with pain as she washed the gashes with an infusion of yarrow and golden seal to fight infection. Emma, brave as she had promised to be, held his hand throughout the procedure, talking to him of small things to distract him from the pain. "You're doing wonderfully," Gabriella encouraged as she applied a poultice of comfort and plant into the cleaned wounds. "The cuts are deep but clean. If we can prevent infection, you should heal well." "Had a good teacher," Ryder murmured, his eyes meeting hers with warmth despite his pain. "Watched you with your herbs. Paid attention." The comment touched her deeply that he had valued her skills enough to learn from her, even before they had acknowledged their feelings for each other. For the next 3 days, Ryder battled a fever as his body fought off infection. Gabriella barely left his side, changing poultices, administering herbal teas, cooling his brow with damp cloths when the fever burned hottest. Emma proved herself invaluable, fetching water, stoking the fire, and even taking on the responsibility of feeding the chickens and collecting eggs without being asked. On the fourth morning, Gabriella woke from a brief sleep in the chair beside the bed to find Ryder watching her, his eyes clear for the first time since the accident. "You look exhausted," he said softly. "And you look better," she replied, pressing a hand to his forehead. "Your fever's broken." He captured her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Because of you. You saved my life, Gabriella." "We saved your life," she corrected, nodding toward Emma, who was still asleep on her pallet near the fire. "She was so brave. Never complained once, even when I know she was scared." "Like her mother," Ryder observed, his eyes never leaving Gabriella's face. "I've been thinking while I've been lying here." "Dangerous pastime," she teased gently. "Maybe so." He shifted slightly, wincing at the movement. "But I've come to a decision. When I'm back on my feet, I want to make this official. You, me, Emma, a real family. If you'll have me." Gabriella's heart swelled with emotion. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "I'm asking you to marry me," Ryder confirmed, his voice rough with feeling. "I know it's fast, and I know I'm not much of a catch right now, laid up like this. But I love you, Gabriella. I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you standing tall on that road, protecting your daughter even when you had nothing left." Tears filled Gabriella's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered, leaning down to kiss him gently. "Yes, I'll marry you." A small sound from across the room made them both look up. Emma stood there, her wooden horse clutched in one hand, watching them with wide eyes. "Emma," Gabriella beckoned her over. "Come here, darling. Mr. Ryder and I have something to tell you." The little girl approached cautiously, relief evident in her face at seeing Ryder awake and alert. "Are you better now?" she asked him. "Getting there. Thanks to you and your mama," he assured her. "But I need to ask you something important." He held out his hand, and Emma took it trustingly. "How would you feel about me becoming part of your family? About me being, well, being a father to you?" Emma's face lit up with joy. "You mean you'd be my papa?" "For real." "For real," Ryder confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "If that's what you'd like." Emma's response was to throw her arms around his neck in a careful hug. "I'd like that very much," she whispered. "I've been wishing for a papa for a long time." Over Emma's head, Ryder's eyes met Gabriella's, both of them blinking back tears at the child's simple, heartfelt acceptance. Ryder's recovery was slow but steady. By the time the first heavy snow of winter blanketed the homestead in mid-November, he was able to move around the cabin with the aid of a makeshift crutch, though Gabriella strictly limited his outdoor activities. "The wounds are healing well," she told him after checking the bandages one evening. "But you need to give them time. Push too hard now, and you'll only delay your recovery." Ryder grimaced, but accepted her judgment. "Never been good at sitting still," he admitted. "Well, you're learning," Gabriella replied with a smile. "Besides, there are advantages to being homebound, such as," she leaned down to kiss him softly, "more time with us." Indeed, the enforced period of rest brought an unexpected sweetness to their days. Ryder taught Emma to read using the few books he possessed: a Bible, a worn copy of The Last of the Mohicans, and a farmer's almanac. In turn, Emma entertained him with stories she invented, populated with brave horses, clever foxes, and the occasional mountain lion that always got its comeuppance in the end. Gabriella found herself falling more deeply in love with Ryder as she witnessed his patience with Emma, his determination to contribute despite his injury, and the tender moments when he thought no one was watching, like when he carefully polished her husband Thomas's pocket watch and returned it to her, or when he whittled a tiny wooden doll to accompany Emma's horse. As December arrived with its shorter days and longer nights, they discussed their wedding plans. With no preacher within miles and travel impossible in the deep snow, they decided on a simple ceremony of their own making. "We'll speak our vows before God and each other," Ryder suggested. "That's what matters most. And when spring comes, we can ride to redemption and make it official if you want," Gabriella added, though in her heart, she already considered herself bound to him. They chose Christmas Day for their ceremony, giving it special significance for Emma, who had never experienced a proper Christmas celebration. In the days leading up to it, there was a flurry of secret activity in the cabin, Ryder disappearing into his workshop for hours, Emma hiding her drawings under her pillow, Gabriella sewing late into the night after the others had gone to sleep. On Christmas Eve, they decorated the cabin with pine boughs and red berries Ryder had gathered during one of his short excursions outside. Emma placed carefully carved wooden stars on the branches, while Gabriella hung the few ornaments she had brought from Willow Creek, small fabric angels her mother had made years ago. That night, as Emma slept soundly in her new room, Gabriella and Ryder sat by the fire, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "Tomorrow you'll be my wife," he said softly, wonder in his voice. "And you'll be my husband," she replied, tilting her face up to his. "Are you nervous?" He considered the question seriously. "Not about marrying you. That feels more right than anything I've ever done." He paused. "But being a father to Emma, that's a responsibility I don't take lightly. I want to be worthy of her trust." "You already are," Gabriella assured him. "The way she looks at you, Ryder, she adores you. And you're so natural with her. She makes it easy," he said with a smile. "She's special, that one. Like her mother." Gabriella nestled closer to him, savoring the moment. Outside, snow fell softly, insulating their small home from the harsh winter world. Inside, warmth and love created a haven none of them had dared hope for just months ago. Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, the sun glinting off the pristine snow that surrounded the cabin. Emma woke them early, bursting with excitement for the day ahead. "Is it time?" "Are you getting married now?" she asked, bouncing on the edge of the bed. Gabriella laughed, reaching out to smooth her daughter's tousled hair. "Not quite yet, darling. First breakfast, then the ceremony, then our celebration." They shared a special breakfast of pancakes with the last of the summer's preserved berries, then set about preparing for the ceremony. Gabriella had refashioned her best dress, adding lace from her collar to the cuffs and hem. Emma wore a new pinafore Gabriella had sewn in secret, and Ryder had managed to shave and trim his hair, looking more handsome than ever in his cleanest shirt and vest. When all was ready, they gathered before the fireplace, a Bible open on the small table beside them. Emma stood solemnly between them, holding a small bouquet of evergreen sprigs tied with a ribbon. Ryder took Gabriella's hands in his eyes reflecting the same love and certainty she felt in her heart. "I didn't write fancy vows," he began, "but what I promise is simple and true. I, Ryder Blackwood, take you, Gabriella Winters, to be my wife. I promise to protect you and Emma with my life, to provide for you with these hands, to honor you with my words and actions, and to love you faithfully for all my days." Tears welled in Gabriella's eyes as she responded, "I, Gabriella Winters, take you, Ryder Blackwood, to be my husband. I promise to stand by your side through whatever life brings us, to make our house a home filled with warmth and love, to respect your wisdom and strength, and to cherish you with all my heart until my last breath." Emma looked up at them both, her face solemn with the importance of the moment. "Do I say something too?" Ryder smiled, crouching down to her level despite the twinge in his healing leg. "Would you like to?" She nodded, her expression serious. "I, Emma Winters, promise to be a good daughter to both of you, to help with chores, to be brave when things are scary, and to love you forever and ever." Her simple, heartfelt words brought fresh tears to Gabriella's eyes. Ryder, too, looked suspiciously damp-eyed as he straightened. "Then by the power of our love and commitment, and before God as our witness," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I declare us husband and wife and family." He leaned down to kiss Gabriella tenderly, then swept Emma up into his arms for a group embrace that felt like the most perfect seal to their vows. After the ceremony came the exchange of gifts, simple treasures created with love. Emma presented them each with drawings she had made, Ryder on horseback for her mother, and Gabriella gathering herbs for her new father. Gabriella gave Ryder a warm scarf she had knitted in secret, and Emma a cloth doll with yellow yarn hair and a dress made from scraps of Gabriella's old blue dress. But it was Ryder's gifts that brought them both to tears. For Emma, he had crafted a complete set of wooden farm animals to accompany her horse chickens, cows, even a tiny cat with whiskers made of horsehair. And for Gabriella, he presented a beautiful wooden box inlaid with a pattern of flowers. "Open it," he urged softly. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, lay a silver ring. "It was my mother's," Ryder explained as Gabriella lifted it out with trembling fingers. "I've been carrying it all these years, waiting for the right person to give it to." The ring fit perfectly as he slid it onto her finger, a tangible symbol of their union and the new life they had forged together. That night, after a celebratory meal and many stories by the fire, they tucked an exhausted but happy Emma into her bed. As Gabriella kissed her daughter goodnight, Emma whispered, "This was the best day ever, Mama." "It was, wasn't it?" Gabriella agreed, smoothing the blanket around her. "Are we a real family now?" Emma asked sleepily. "The most real family there is," Gabriella assured her. "Now sleep tight, my love." When she returned to the main room, Ryder was waiting by the fire, his face illuminated by the dancing flames. He held out his hand to her, and she went to him without hesitation, fitting perfectly into his embrace as his arms encircled her. "Mrs. Blackwood," he murmured against her hair. "I like the sound of that," she replied, tilting her face up for his kiss. That night, they consummated their marriage with a tenderness and passion that left Gabriella breathless. In Ryder's arms, she found a love she had never expected to find again after Thomas's death, deeper, perhaps, for having known loss and found hope anew. As they lay together afterward, the fire burning low, Ryder traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "I never thought I'd have this," he admitted quietly. "After everything that happened, I figured I'd live out my days alone in these mountains." "And now?" Gabriella asked, propping herself up to look at his face. "Now I can't imagine a day without you and Emma," he said simply. "You've given me back something I thought was lost forever, a home, a family, a reason to build rather than just survive." Gabriella kissed him softly. "You've given us the same gifts, Ryder. Safety, belonging, love." Winter settled fully over the mountains in the days following Christmas, bringing storms that confined them to the cabin for days at a time. But rather than feeling trapped, they found joy in their enforced togetherness. Ryder continued Emma's reading lessons, adding writing as she mastered each book. Gabriella experimented with new recipes using their preserved foods, and in the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking, reading, or simply enjoying each other's company. Ryder's leg healed steadily under Gabriella's care, and by February, he was able to resume most of his normal activities, though she still insisted he avoid anything too strenuous. Together, they began planning for spring, discussing which crops to plant, whether to add more livestock, how to expand their modest homestead. "I've been thinking," Ryder said one evening as they sat at the table, a rough map of the property spread before them. "We should build a proper house come summer. Something bigger, with more rooms for." He hesitated, then finished softly, "For our growing family." Gabriella looked up sharply, understanding his meaning immediately. "Are you saying you want more children?" "Only if you do," he replied carefully. "I know Emma is enough, and I'd be content with that. But if you wanted another child, someday." The idea filled Gabriella with unexpected longing. She had always wanted a large family, but after Thomas's death and her struggle to raise Emma alone, she had set that dream aside. Now, with Ryder, it seemed possible again. "I do want that," she admitted. "Very much." The smile that spread across his face was worth any uncertainty. "Then we'll build with the future in mind," he declared, marking the map with decisive strokes. "A proper bedroom for Emma, one for us, and space for whoever else might join our family." As February turned to March, the first signs of spring began to appear: longer days, the occasional warm breeze, patches of ground emerging from beneath the melting snow. Ryder ventured further from the cabin, checking trap lines he had set before his injury and hunting the game that was beginning to stir from winter dormancy. One crisp morning, as Gabriella was teaching Emma about the different herbs starting to sprout in the protected spots around the cabin, they heard the sound of approaching horses, multiple riders, by the sound of it. Visitors were rare in these mountains, especially in early spring when the trails were still treacherous with mud and lingering snow. Ryder was out checking the far pasture where he planned to graze cattle once they could afford them. "Emma, go inside," Gabriella instructed calmly, though her heart raced with sudden fear. "Stay there until I call you." "But Mama," Now, Emma, Gabriella said firmly, and the little girl obeyed, though reluctantly. Gabriella stood her ground as 3 riders emerged from the tree-lined 2 men and a woman, all travel-worn but well-dressed for the frontier. The lead rider, an older man with a silver beard and stern features, reined his horse to a stop a respectful distance away. "Good morning, madam," he called. "Pardon the intrusion. We're looking for a man named Ryder Blackwood. We were told in Redemption that he homesteads in these parts." Gabriella's throat tightened with fear. Had they come to arrest Ryder for what had happened in Bitter Creek? "May I ask your business with my husband?" she replied, emphasizing the relationship to make her position clear. The man's eyebrows rose slightly at her response. "Husband? Well, now, that's unexpected." He dismounted, handing his reins to the younger man beside him. "My name is Judge Albert Harmon. This is my clerk, Mr. Peterson, and my daughter, Miss Sarah Harmon." The woman, who bore a striking resemblance to the judge, nodded politely from her saddle. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with intelligent eyes and a determined set to her jaw. "I'm Gabriella Blackwood." Gabriella introduced herself, still wary. "My husband is checking our property, but should return shortly. Perhaps you'd like to wait inside? It's still chilly out here." The judge accepted her invitation with a nod, and the 3 visitors followed her into the cabin. Emma was sitting at the table, pretending to read, but obviously listening intently. She looked up with curious eyes as the strangers entered. "This is my daughter, Emma," Gabriella said, placing a protective hand on the child's shoulder. "Emma, these people are looking for your father." Emma, quick to understand the situation, smiled politely. "He's the best papa in the world," she announced with childish loyalty that brought an unexpected smile to the judge's stern face. "I'm sure he is, young lady," he replied kindly. Gabriella busied herself making coffee, her mind racing. Should she send Emma to find Ryder and warn him? Or would that only make matters worse if these people had come to arrest him? Before she could decide, the cabin door opened, and Ryder himself stepped inside, freezing momentarily at the sight of the unexpected visitors before his eyes locked on the woman. "Sarah?" he breathed, disbelief evident in his voice. The woman rose from her seat, tears suddenly streaming down her face. "Hello, big brother," she said softly. Gabriella stared in shock, looking between them. "Sister?" But Ryder had said his sister was killed along with his parents. Before she could speak, Ryder had crossed the room in 3 long strides and gathered the woman in a fierce embrace. "They told me you were dead," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "After the raid. When I came home, the neighbors said none of you survived. They thought I wouldn't," Sarah explained, clinging to him. "I was barely alive when they found me. By the time I recovered enough to ask about you, you had already gone after those men." The judge cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "Perhaps we should all sit down," he suggested. "There's much to explain, and I believe your wife and daughter deserve to hear it as well." At his words, Ryder seemed to remember the others in the room. He turned to Gabriella, his expression a mix of joy, confusion, and concern. "Gabriella, this is my sister, Sarah. And this is—" He looked at the older man questioningly. "Judge Albert Harmon," the man supplied. "Your brother-in-law, as it happens. Sarah and I were married 2 years ago." Understanding dawned on Ryder's face. "You're the judge from Bitter Creek, the one who was going to sentence me." The judge nodded gravely. "The very same. Though I didn't know then what I know now." For the next hour, over coffee and the last of Gabriella's dried apple cake, the story unfolded. After recovering from her injuries, Sarah had spent years searching for her brother, following rumors and false leads across the frontier. She had eventually settled in Bitter Creek as a schoolteacher, where she met and married the widowed judge. "When I heard about the incident with the raiders, I knew it had to be you," Sarah explained, holding her brother's hand tightly. "The description matched, and who else would track those men so far for revenge? But by the time I convinced Albert of the truth, you had already escaped. We've been looking for you ever since," the judge added. "To clear your name, among other things." Ryder looked stunned. "Clear my name? How?" "New evidence came to light after you left," Judge Harmon explained. "The third man, the mayor's son, he confessed on his deathbed last year. Admitted that they attacked you first, that you acted in self-defense just as you claimed. We have a signed affidavit," Sarah added eagerly. And Albert has used his influence to have the charges against you officially dropped. You're a free man, Ryder. You can come out of hiding." Gabriella watched the emotions play across her husband's face: relief, disbelief, and finally, a dawning joy. He looked at her, his eyes full of wonder. "Did you hear that? I'm free." "I heard," she said softly, happiness for him overwhelming any other emotion. Emma, who had been listening intently, tugged at Ryder's sleeve. "Does that mean you're not my papa anymore?" she asked anxiously. Ryder immediately gathered her into his arms. "No, little one. It means I'm still your papa, but now we can go places together without me having to worry. We can visit towns, meet people." He looked up at Sarah. "You can know your aunt." The remainder of the day passed in a blur of conversation and emotion. Sarah was enchanted with Emma, and even the judge unbent enough to tell stories of his own children and grandchildren back in Bitter Creek. As Gabriella prepared dinner for their unexpected guests, she observed the joy in Ryder's face as he reconnected with his sister, filling in the years they had lost. That night, after their visitors had been settled in Sarah and Emma's room, the judge and his clerk in bedrolls by the fire, Ryder and Gabriella lay together in their bed, speaking in whispers. "Are you happy?" she asked, stroking his face in the darkness. "Beyond words," he admitted. "Having Sarah back, it's like a piece of my heart returned that I thought was lost forever." He pulled Gabriella closer. "But even before they came, I was happy, Gabriella. You and Emma gave me that. What happens now?" she asked, the question that had been on her mind all day. Ryder was quiet for a moment. "Sarah wants us to consider moving to Bitter Creek. The judge has connections, says he could help me establish a ranch there. Better schools for Emma, more opportunities." Gabriella felt a pang of uncertainty. "Is that what you want?" "I want what's best for our family," he replied thoughtfully. "This homestead, it's been my sanctuary, but it's isolated. Emma deserves the chance to know other children, to get a proper education. And you deserve the chance to live without looking over your shoulder," Gabriella added softly. "But it would mean leaving your healing work," Ryder pointed out. "The life we've built here." Gabriella considered this. "We could build a new life, Ryder. My skills would be useful anywhere. And perhaps in a town, with proper support, I could even expand my knowledge, help more people." "You wouldn't mind?" he asked, searching her face in the dim light. "Home isn't a place," she told him, echoing words he had once said to her. "It's the people you love. You and Emma are my home, Ryder Blackwood. Wherever you go, I go." He kissed her then, a kiss full of gratitude and love. "We don't have to decide tonight," he murmured against her lips. "We have time now. Time to choose our path together." "Together," she agreed, settling into his embrace. Spring arrived in earnest in the weeks following the judge's visit. The mountains burst into bloom, the streams ran full with melting snow, and new life appeared everywhere, including, as Gabriella confirmed with quiet joy, within her own body. She told Ryder the news on a sunny April morning as they walked the property, discussing their future. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for: stunned silence followed by a whoop of joy that startled a nearby flock of birds into flight. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her in a careful circle before setting her down with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "A baby," he whispered, placing his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Due in late autumn," Gabriella confirmed, covering his hand with her own. "What do you think, Mr. Blackwood? Are you ready for another little one around here?" "More than ready," he assured her, kissing her with such feeling that she was breathless when they parted. "This settles it, though. We need to think seriously about the judge's offer. A proper doctor nearby would ease my mind considerably." They discussed it with Emma that evening, explaining about the baby and the possibility of moving to Bitter Creek. To their relief, she was excited about both prospects, especially when Ryder promised her a pony of her own if they established a ranch. By summer, their decision was made. They would sell the homestead to a young couple from Redemption who were eager to establish themselves in the mountains and move to Bitter Creek before winter set in. The judge had already secured land for them on the outskirts of town, good grazing territory with a small but sturdy house that could be expanded as needed. As Gabriella's belly grew with their child, they prepared for the journey and the new life awaiting them. Ryder insisted on building a proper wagon with comfortable suspension to make the trip easier on her, working long hours to ensure everything was perfect. The day of departure arrived in early September, the mountain air already carrying a hint of the coming autumn. Gabriella stood with Ryder and Emma on the hill overlooking the cabin that had been their sanctuary and the site of their greatest happiness. "Are you sad to leave, Mama?" Emma asked, noticing Gabriella's pensive expression. "A little," she admitted. "This place gave us so much safety when we needed it most. A home, a family." She squeezed Ryder's hand. "But we're taking the most important parts with us." Ryder nodded, understanding in his eyes. "We'll come back someday," he promised. "Show the little one where it all began." As they descended the hill toward the waiting wagon, Gabriella thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, from that desperate day on the road outside Willow Creek to now, with a husband who adored her, a daughter who thrived, and a new life growing within her. She recalled Ryder's words from their first meeting, spoken with such certainty. "You belong with me." How right he had been, though neither of them could have imagined then all that would unfold from that simple declaration. The future stretched before them now, full of promise and possibility. There would be challenges, of course, a new town to adapt to, judgments to face perhaps, a ranch to establish. But they would face it all together, stronger for having found each other against all odds. As Ryder helped her into the wagon, his hand protective at her back, Emma chattering excitedly beside them, Gabriella knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged with this man, this family, this love that had been unexpected and yet felt more right than anything she had ever known. The wagon rolled forward, carrying them toward their new beginning. Behind them, the small cabin stood empty but not abandoned, a symbol of redemption, of second chances, of love found in the most unlikely of circumstances. And ahead lay the rest of their story, waiting to be written together.